Hello students, I'm Professor Plínio Monteiro, and in this video I will explain the role of costs in developing your pricing strategy for global markets. First of all, we need to understand the different types of costs that can exist in a given business. And let's start with the definition of the fixed costs. So every business will have some costs that will be constant, independent on the level of production. This means that despite the number of units that you're going to sell or produce, this cost will be constant. These costs are usually related to rent, energy, interest, and so on. But also we have the variable costs, and these are costs that will vary directly with the number of units produced. Basically, these costs represent the items and the resources that you apply to deliver and produce each item in your production. And because of that, you're going to have a direct relation between the number of units produced and the total variable cost. And the total cost of a given business will be the sum of the fixed cost plus the quantity produced multiplied by the variable costs. So this will be the total cost of your business. But since you increase your number of units produced, then you're going to have variations in the average cost of production for each item from your business. So the average cost can be estimated as the fixed cost plus the variable cost multiplied by the quantity produced divided by the quantity produced. And if you simplify this equation, we can see that the average cost will be your fixed cost divided by the quantity plus the variable cost. Let's look in this scheme how these different costs will affect the total cost of a business with one example. Suppose that I have a variable cost of 25 reais and my fixed cost is 100,000 reais. So as you can see, our fixed cost is constant, independent on the number of units I'm going to produce. And we have this line, there is the total variable cost. That is basically the quantity produced multiplied by the variable cost. And as you can see, as we increase the quantity, basically the total variable cost will increase. And this total cost line is basically the sum of the fixed cost plus the variable cost multiplied by the quantity. But let's look to this last line here of the average cost. If you produce too few units, like 1,000 units, your average cost per unit will be very high, like 800,000 reais. But since you increase your production level, then your average cost will be reduced. Take into account that you have more units to make a division of the total cost to reach a smaller average cost. As you will notice, this is basically the idea behind one economy of scale. So this model here represents that the average cost, since you can produce and of course sell more units, this means that your average cost will be reduced given the increase of quantity produced and sold. But one thing that is interesting is that not all the time our average cost of production can vary according to a specific level of quantity capacity. So for instance, given a given factory, probably you're going to have an optimal, a best number of units to be produced given a certain resources, given infrastructure that you're using. And if you produce less than that, then your average cost will be greater. And if you produce more than that, then your average cost can increase. This is very common when you have the best quantity to produce with a certain factory and a certain type of resources. And if you try to increase your production beyond a certain point, probably it's better to choose a new technology, choose a new factory to have another curve like that with a new optimum for the average cost. One very important aspect of costs in international marketing is the role of what we call the price escalation. And what is that? Basically, once you have your basic costs for producing something, then you need to add a lot of additional costs for this product. For instance, shipping costs, tariffs, distributor markups, and so on. And now these costs related to your distribution channel and also to tax related to tax from government, this can create one escalation in price, a huge increase in the price of your product. This is normal when you deal with local market, but for foreign markets, this is even more important. And the reason why is that you are going to have more intermediaries, and then you're going to have more tax levels for different levels of your sales, and also you have taxes that you're going to pay in home country and in the host country. And all these factors can create a huge increase in the price when you compare the price to produce something and the final price for the customer in a foreign market. So, what you can do to reduce this price escalation? Basically, you need to find the best way to distribute your product in order to reduce the number of intermediaries, or finding the best mix of intermediaries that will not ask a lot of taxes or fees to deal with your product. Another way to do that is to lower the price from exports. For instance, it's very common for firms to have smaller price for products aimed to foreign markets. And the reason why is that the company knows that when this product reach the foreign market, given you're going to have a lot of price escalation, the price for the final customers can be so high that can limit the access to the market. Another way to do that is to establish local production. So if you have, in a given sector, you have a lot of price escalation, could be wise to move your production from home country to host country. Basically by using some form of hierarchical approach for entry mode, and to investing directly in the host market, and or at least trying to get more close to the market that you're going to achieve. And finally, you can make pressure on the channel members to accept lower profit margins. So you can make a deal and make an arrangement with the networks and say, if you work with this product with this level of margin, the price for the final customer will be impossible to pay. So basically, you can deal and make an arrangement with your supply chain in order to reduce the margins and have the final price in a level that will be acceptable for your customers. These are examples of the effect of price escalation in foreign markets. Let's start with the first example of a domestic channel. Then you have your firm that will sell the product to a wholesaler and then to the retailer, and then retailer will sell the product for a customer. So the firm net price will be 100 euros, not euro, 100, and then you don't need to pay all these insurance and shipping costs, landed costs, tariffs, import pays, import margin, and so on. So the wholesaler will start with a cost of 100. So if they add 20% of margin, then if they apply a 20% of markup, then they will have the retailer will pay the price of 120 units. And if the retailer adds 20% of markup, then adding 40% of markup to 120, then the final cost will be 168. So let's compare this with the foreign market channel. So we can have two options for delivering the product in a foreign market. In the B way, this example B, we have a firm sending to the border that will say to send to the wholesaler, to the retailer, and to the customer. In that case, you're going to have a firm net price of 100, and then you have $10 of insurance, and then the landed cost will be 110, and you need to pay 10% of tariffs to export the product, to export the product to a given market. Then the final price for the wholesaler will be 121. If you have the same markup applied in home country, then the price for the final customer will be 203. And if you compare that, you can say that you have 21% of increase compared to the domestic market. And in this other way to deliver a product in a foreign market, then you're going to have the firm, the border, importer, the wholesaler, the retailer, and so on. In that case, if you add up all these costs, you end with a cost of 234. That is basically 39% of increase compared to the domestic channel. So you can use this kind of scheme to understand what will be the impact of different ways to achieve the foreign market in a way that you're going into the final price of your product. And then you can estimate the level of price escalation and choose different strategies to reduce the impact of this price escalation to the price asked or that the final customer will pay for your product. You know the importance of economies of scale in driving lower costs when you increase the level of production of a given product. This important aspect in international marketing is also related to the concept of learning curve. So what is a learning curve? Basically, when you start having more experience producing something, produce a new technology, a new product, you can reduce the mistakes when you in the process for delivering, for producing, for marketing, and all this experience can represent a lot of cost advantages for competing in international markets. So what happens if you in international markets that makes learning curves so important? Since you have more time more opportunities to learn the best practices and to use the knowledge in different areas in the world and use that to improve your productivity and to reduce inefficiencies and reduce costs that are not necessary, then you can increase increase your cost advantages for competing in global markets. So when you drive to compete globally, it's very important to understand how you can improve your processes and how you can improve your way to deliver the products in the market in a way that you can gain advantages from this learning curve. And this is one example of a learning curve. So suppose that we have, for each dot here, we have a given variable cost for producing something, given an accumulated level of production. For instance, in this first point here, you have you produced 800 units, and the variable cost was something like 6,650. There's something very close to that. And in the next level, the next semester or year, then you have accumulated production of this quantity, 1.2 thousand units, and their variable cost was that, very close to 6.8 thousand reais. And then over the years, you have different levels of accumulated level of production and your variable cost. As you can see here, you have a trend that once you increase the accumulated production, then you're going to have a reduction on the variable cost. The idea behind estimating your learning curve is to use a statistical model that will basically be estimated by the logs of the accumulated production and the logs of the variable costs, and use a linear model to estimate the relation between these two variables. And then you can have the parameters of your learning curve, and you can use that to estimate what will be your cost advantage once you increase the level of production of a given product. There are a lot of studies showing what are the average learning tax for different activities in global industries. Let's give an example. The research and development will have a learning tax of 95%. It means that each time that you double your experience with new projects, basically the cost of each project will be reduced in 5%. For manufacturing of parts and components, the learning curve is 75%. It means that every time that you double your accumulated production of parts and components, the average cost will be reduced in 25%. To sub-assembling, the learning tax will be 70%. So if you double the level of accumulated production of your the companies that are assembling your product, the average cost will be reduced in 30%. And so on. We have 10% and 90% of learning curve for marketing, 85% for distribution, and 95% for retailing. Of course, these numbers are average, but you can use that as clues to understand what will be the impact of the reduction of your cost once you start having more operations in different countries in the world over the time. The idea of experience curve and its impacts on costs, it's especially important when you take into account the concept of product life cycle. What happens when you look to a product life cycle? During the introduction, usually the average cost of a business will be very high because you're starting to learn what to do, start to learning how to produce, and also will be very high the average cost of a given industry. But once you pass through the introduction and start going to the growth stage of the product life cycle, then you start gaining more experience in terms of production, and then your average costs start being reduced. And also the average cost of the industry, if you compare, thinking that you're comparing an efficient company to the average in the market, so the other competitors will not be so efficient as this company considered an efficient one, then your company, if you are really efficient in reducing costs, in learning more, and reducing the mistakes, then you can have one advantage in cost, especially during the growth stage of the product life cycle. But of course, new technologies can introduce new ways to produce your product, and then this can usually when you reach the maturity of the product life cycle, probably other competitors will be able to copy your advantages in cost, and then even one efficient company will not be able to have a lot of cost advantages using the experience curve to become more competitive. But basically, one company is focusing in this productivity, focusing in reducing the mistakes and making the best practice, they can use that to have some cost advantages, especially during the stage of growth in the product life cycle. And you can use that to to increase your profits or to reduce your price to achieve higher market share for the future. This video was intended to explain the role of costs in driving international pricing strategies. This is it for the video. See you in the next. Bye.